So I'm not sure what it is about heated grips that makes people think that the person riding with them is some sort of sissy or has a weak demeanor of some sort. But in my mind, if you're running heated grips, it means that you are dedicated to riding your motorcycle, and that is definitely my case. I have taken this thing out when it is below freezing. So today I'm going to install the Tusk Grip Heaters on this bike. Now this basically is just going to get stuck underneath the stock grips. Should be pretty easy to install. Basically you just need to connect it to a power source on the bike. I'm going to kind of skip the battery portion and use these little connectors that I can put some information on down in the description. These will allow me to actually use a plug that is on, or rather under, this side cover here, and that's actually the plug I believe that you would plug in the Yamaha heated grips to, which I think are not available anymore, but these are going to be much cheaper than pretty much anything else you can find. Now because these are rather cost effective, they're obviously not going to be extremely high tech. Just come with this three-way switch. Pretty simple system for going for the high to the low, and that's just going to be this resistor here. So basically this just kind of burns off a little bit of the power when you have it on that low setting. Now some people have complained about these connections breaking off here, and that is definitely something that can and probably will happen if you don't take the proper precautions. So they say in the instructions that you've got to put some electrical tape around this. I'm going to skip that step. They've already got this piece on here, and what I'll end up doing is actually throwing zip ties around this just to keep these in place once it's on the bars. And that will be the first thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to pull my Tusk D-Flex handguards off of here and the stock grips. Now if you've never pulled these grips off of here, they are going to be glued on, but just a little bit. The best way that I've ever found to get these things off is to shoot some compressed air underneath them. And essentially what I did the first time I pulled these off is just kind of work my way around, kind of peeled them up in a few places, and then eventually they were able to just shoot off. Just gonna sneak this nozzle underneath. There's a couple things you want to do with this before you pull the adhesive back off of it and before you stick it on the bike. The first thing is to bend these wires up while grabbing the soldered points here. These wires are going to have to make their way up around a control of some sort. Doesn't matter what side of the bike it's going on. The other thing you're going to want to do is dry fit this to the bar, and especially on the throttle side, you're going to want to play with a couple different scenarios here to make sure that your wires are not only in a spot that are going to be safe from getting pinched by any levers, but also that they're going to have full range of motion when you go to crack the throttle. Placement this direction is also very important. You have to keep in mind that you're going to throw a zip tie on this and then still fit your grip over the top of it, so you don't want to smash the wires up against this. So another thing you need to keep in mind, especially on the throttle tube side, is that you are going to have a section here that does not get any heating elements on it. Now, I've kind of got that where my palm is going to be located. The nice thing about that is my fingers will still get all that heat. So now I've got my wires ran, zip tied down. I'm happy with where they're all at. I'm going to slip my grip over here, and you just want to make sure you make it over the edge of the heating element. And once that's done, got this side done too. I did still throw a zip tie on this just because I think it's gonna make them last a bit longer. Definitely worth the few fractions of a cent to throw it on there. Obviously it does offset the grip a little bit, but not a big deal. I've kind of got this one slid in a little bit because most of the time my hand is gonna be as close up to the control here as I can get it. With my Tusk chub bar here, it's got the kind of knurled end on it. Seems like it does still stick pretty well, but once I get the grip over it, that should be no problem at all. Now obviously this side placement of wire isn't going to be nearly as important, but you do of course want to make sure that you still have room for your clutch lever here, and because that's spaced away a little bit, it looks like I do kind of run into it, but it's not going to impede the actual range of motion of that lever. So just kind of be mindful of that, and of course what is going on here. Great. You do want to make sure that you're not going to be pinching those wires. So I've got both sets of wires ran up here, and I'm going to end up taking one from each side, connecting those together, and it doesn't matter which ones, but you want to connect those together and then run a line off of that safely down to the ground side of the plug that's going to be down here. The other wires from each side we're going to connect, and those will actually get hooked up to this center connection point. On the two outside terminals here, we've got the wiring harness that came with it that's got that little resistor on it. You want the resistor to be on the side that has the high label on it. And that seems sort of backwards because it's actually going to be sending power through the other way, but that's the way you need to do it to get high to be high and low to be low. These of course terminate at one single point here, and this point is going to be ran down underneath this cover to the positive side of that plug. This thing is intended to be mounted through a hole that this would fit through, and then you put this little high-low plate over it and tighten these locking nuts down. What I'm going to do instead though, since I really don't have a good spot to do that on this bike, is just throw some VHB tape on the back side of this and then mount it right underneath my gauge cluster here. And as long as you apply some good even pressure on this and let it sit for a couple hours before you go out and ride or try to use it, it's not going anywhere. So I've got the two grounds ran down on each side of the steering neck, just kind of zip tied to a wire any place that I could find it, and then I've got them twisted together. And at that point, I'm just going to have to connect another wire, and that's where I'll eventually connect it underneath this panel. I've got my two hot lines, which also come down the factory wiring, and then are kind of looped down and then come back. These are twisted together, and then I've just got the little connector that comes in the Tusk kit that I'm going to crimp down and then plug in. Do the all-important tug test, make sure these aren't going to come out on the trail, and then get this hooked up. So then I've just got all of that zip tied down to the main umbilical that runs to the dash down here. I've got the sections that come from the hot line just kind of coming off on each side, and there's just kind of a loose loop that I will probably try to tie up in a little bit better spot, but obviously you need a little bit of play there, actually I guess kind of quite a bit of play there for when you turn the bars all the way one way and all the way the other. So now I'm finally going to pull this panel off. There are 3 fasteners on the inside here that are just going to be the little quarter turn plastic pop rivet guys, like that. And then we've got these 3 fasteners to take out. Don't lose your little plastic washers. Don't forget to unplug your turn signal. And if you're interested, these are the Tusk mini stalks. Definitely a nice bright LED turn signal. A lot of the LED turn signals are not bright. These definitely are. I can put a link for them down in the description. So now if you kind of follow this wiring harness down to this point right here, you've got a plug that looks like it's plugged into something, but what it's plugged into is actually just a dead end here. So what I'm gonna have to do is remove the tape from here, and then this will come off, and then we can get some terminals stuck into here. So now I'm just gonna take my wiring from up top here and fish it through this hole. So I've got this just kind of flopped over here for now, and then I stuck my wiring through the stock zip tie. I'm gonna fish this through. And now what I'm gonna do over here is zip tie this wiring together here, and then actually try to keep this guy just kind of hanging out there. Because basically how a resistor works is essentially it takes the extra load that's passing through it, and instead of letting it through the wire, it just kind of expels it as heat. So that means that this thing is gonna get hot. So the right way to do this would be to stick a multimeter in the terminals on here, but it also works to just stick the bare wires in there. Of course, be careful when you're doing that. It looks like if you've got the black wire on the right side there, up here, and then the red wire on the left, looking at it, of course, in this direction, then your black, of course, is your ground, and that one right there, the red one, they're both red with a white stripe. I don't know what the other one does. Maybe that's power 2, but this one I'm definitely getting power out of. That's where my hot line's coming out, and I've got heat. So to complete my ground, I grabbed the wire that I had left over from the kit that I put on the TW200. This is just simple 18 gauge wire. You can pick some up from a hardware store. I'll be using one of these splice butt connectors here. These are pretty simple to use. You basically just stick the stripped end of wire in here so it butts up against the insulation, and then you stick your crimp tool on here and crimp it. This is actually a little bit big for the single wire, but I've got the slightly larger connector size so I can fit both of the other side in here. Now some people might not like this because it's not watertight. I'll probably wrap a little bit of electrical tape around it and we'll just call that good. So I'm just gonna plug this in so I know which way it goes. And then remove my 2 top plugs there. Now along with these little connectors, I picked up these little rubber gaskets. So this goes around the wire first, and then this will get stuffed down kind of in place where the plugs were. Each wire gets one of these. Now I know this seems like kind of a lot of extra work and a lot of extra parts and specialty tools. You probably could just tap this right into the running light for the blinker. My LEDs actually don't even have a running light, so that circuit doesn't really get used. I'm not sure what else is on that circuit. Honestly, these grips draw so few amps, it probably wouldn't matter. And actually on the TW, that's exactly where I tied it in. I would definitely not say I'm an expert at this, but the tool makes it actually pretty easy. You've got double labels on each side, and that's because one side is for crimping the wire and the other side is for crimping the insulation. Look at that. Like I'm an expert. Works pretty nice. So now it's just a matter of getting the terminals put in the right slots here. My ground coming from the back here has to be top right. These should just pop in. And we'll get the hot line, match that up with the red side. I'm just using a zip tie to push these little grommets in all the way. Check that out. Not bad at all. Kind of a lot of work for not really a whole lot of gain, but hey, technically plug and play, didn't have to splice into anything. So I'll probably zip tie that up just so it's not flopping in there. We'll get this back together, get the can guards back on, and then we'll test them out. So I have had these on the bike for I think about a month now, and just about the time that I got them installed, it finally kind of turned into spring and then turned into summer really quick. Been a couple days in the 90s already, so I think the coldest that I've been able to test these out has been like 50 degrees, which that was a pretty cold, clammy 50-degree day, and honestly I wasn't really dressed for it. Between the fact that I think these hand grips were a poor decision on my part, and the fact that I just wasn't dressed that warm, and then it just kind of wasn't pumping enough blood to my hands to warm them up, my fingers were actually a little bit cold. I think the kind of hard plastic material that these are made out of just doesn't really transfer the heat very well. That and the fact that the front side of it where your fingers are have kind of like that little, like, I don't know, half waffle design on it that kind of keeps your fingers from actually reaching the warm part of the grip. Luckily though, I've got this same exact set on the TW, so I can tell you that if you've got the right grip on it, it changes things drastically. I was riding that bike around when it was 30-some degrees out on Easter, and I put quite a few miles on them that day, and they kept my hands plenty warm. I believe I had the same exact set of gloves on, and the set of gloves that you're wearing is definitely going to change how much of that heat gets to your hand. Obviously, if you have a thick palm glove, well, you're not going to feel the heat that much. You basically need a thin palm and a well-insulated backside to keep the top side of your hands warm. The set that I've got on right now are the MSR Air Glove, so they'll actually breathe pretty well on the outside. And what is it, 61 out today. I'm plenty warm. I think if I leave my hands on here, I will probably have to pull them off and let them cool down a little bit. I've had that a couple times already where they kind of get a little bit too warm, and the throttle side always gets a little bit hotter than the non-throttle side, just because you've got the plastic under there that's kind of isolating the metal bar, where the one on the other side is right direct on the metal bar, and this part's cold and that wants to warm the part under the grip up, but you're kind of fighting that chilly side, and that's just kind of
going to be what you're going to run into on a bike. The heck is that? Fox? I think so. I haven't really used the low setting all that much. It seems like it definitely works. It definitely drops the temperature. Maybe a little bit too much, and I guess maybe not. Again, that's kind of going to depend on how warm you like your hands and what type of temperatures you ride in. What are you doing? Go on. Out enjoying the nice night before the storm hits. And it's coming. So I think I will be switching these out for something with a little bit of a softer compound like the TW's got. That has the Tusk grips on it. And I would have actually stuck a set of those on here, except I think those are just a hair shorter than what I would need on here with my longer controls. So I think I'll probably pick a set of something else up and try those out. Luckily, I did not glue these on, so going to remove them will be just as simple as you saw earlier, just a little bit of compressed air. They should slide right back off. I did actually find a way to kind of stuff, and you can't even see where they are, my zip ties underneath the portion of the grip here, so I was able to get them a little bit closer so they look a little bit more factory than probably the last time you saw them. Kind of hard to tell there's even wires in there. No issues with them so far. Don't really anticipate any as long as you have that zip tied in place and are careful about where you run your wires and careful about zip tying them, and you don't hook a tree branch into them. I think they should last you for a good long time. And again, having the grips not glued on is going to kind of prolong their life even more, because then if your grips wear out, just shoot a little bit of compressed air under them. They should pop right off and you can put a new set on and keep going. So I'm darn happy to have them up on here. I cannot tell you how many times I've just struggled through, and it is so nice to just be able to have a switch to flip when your hands start to get cold. And even if they're not cold, it's just kind of nice to have warm hands when you ride. And yep, right about now, right hand's getting a little hot. Not unbearable yet, but getting to the point that maybe it's time to turn it down or just do one of those. So thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully this video was helpful. If it was, make sure to let me know down in the comment section. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure you click that Swanky Cat logo down at the bottom. Other than that, guys, get out, enjoy this beautiful world whenever you get a chance. And if you can't do that right now, here's some more videos to check out in the meantime.